Smokey the Bear said, only you can prevent forest fires. That's right. Smokey the Bear said, you can prevent forest fires. What does Smokey the Bear have to do with modern slavery or human trafficking? I'll be using those terms interchangeably because they mean the same thing, the illegal sale of human beings. The second largest and the fastest growing criminal enterprise in the world. What does Smokey the Bear have to do with the fact that millions of children, women, and men are enslaved around the world, including right here in Columbia, Missouri, in forced labor and commercial sex industries? Well, I like Smokey the Bear's message, and I believe that you can prevent human trafficking, that you can take action to fight against slavery, and that you can make a positive difference in the lives of victims and survivors of slavery, our fellow citizens. There are many words that are used to describe, define human trafficking or slavery, and maybe you've heard some of them. Forced labor, sexual exploitation, domestic minor sex trafficking, undocumented immigrant laborer, child pornography, a child victim of prostitution, not a child prostitute, but a child victim of prostitution. There are many words used to describe this horrible, horrible crime, but it comes down to one word in my mind. It's not fitting on the slide, but it's exploitation. So imagine this word, exploitation. It means that somebody's used for the benefit of someone else. That's what it all boils down to. Human trafficking is a complex crime. I don't want to mislead you. Generally, when we talk about human trafficking, which, by the way, is a federal crime, an international crime, and a state crime, we talk about labor trafficking and sex trafficking. But in fact, it's so complex that recently Polaris, a non-governmental organization that is a leader in the effort to eradicate slavery, put out a report after they analyzed massive data. They identified and characterized 25 types of slavery, 25 types of slavery here in the US. And each one had a profile of a trafficker, a profile of a victim, methods for recruiting, and methods of controlling the victim. They were from traveling sales crew to a residential brothel. Residential brothel is something that Columbia, Missouri is familiar with because we had a recent case of trafficking where a home right here in our community had people being sold for sex out of it and purchasers going to that home to buy sex from human beings. And one of them was a child. That child was a victim of sex trafficking. That is not a home, that is a residential brothel. The first time I had an opportunity to meet a victim, a survivor of trafficking, I was anxious. I had read her story of exploitation. It was horrific. There was torture involved, mutilation involved. For several years, it went on. She was kept here in a community in Missouri, in the basement of a home, in a cage for several years. So I was anxious when I met her, knocked on the door. We had brought, along with another volunteer, items for her new baby to be donated to her. She opened the door, and what do you suppose I saw? I saw a person. I saw a mother. I saw a woman who happened to have long, beautiful hair. I saw a person who greeted us, thanked us for coming with these items for her baby. I saw a loving mother holding her child. And that was a profound lesson for me because it put a face, a human being, behind that story of exploitation. And that, for me, changed everything that I did in the 9 years following, bringing me to this day, speaking to you. that the lives of the survivors of trafficking were front and center for me and must stay front and center in this fight. So I want to tell you more about victims and give you an image. Really, it could be anybody, nobody in particular, and everybody in general. And I also want to show you an image of traffickers. Same image. It could be anybody, and it might be many of us that we know and interact with, go to church with, shop in the store with. There is no single look to a victim or a trafficker. And I also want to show you an image of those who purchase, the demand side of trafficking. Same image. No one in particular, but it could be every one of us. In fact, in the demand end, we like cheap products, and we are part of that demand for forced labor. Do you watch porn? Perhaps then you are a user of sex trafficking. There are many faces, many lives behind this horrible crime. But there's another category that I want to share with you, and that is one of advocate. It's also not fitting on the screen quite, but it says advocate, a person who publicly supports a cause. And my cause is human trafficking. I don't have a degree. I'm not a prosecutor. I'm sorry, I do have a degree. I don't have a degree in human trafficking. I'm not a prosecutor. I'm not a victim of trafficking. Thankfully, I'm not a trafficker. But I come with the experience of those survivors that I've had the privilege of helping me, who've informed me and educated me and have allowed me to be an advocate, a person who can publicly support their cause and the cause of trafficking. It doesn't require any special expertise. And each and every one of you here tonight can be an advocate. You can be a citizen advocate. When I speak about trafficking to groups, it might be in a formal business lunch, and it might be difficult. When you talk about human trafficking, you have to use the word sex because there's sex trafficking, and that can make people feel uncomfortable. And you also have to talk about pornography because there are victims within that industry. Also not a great topic at a noon Rotary Club luncheon. But I have become bolder and bolder in my being an advocate for the sake of survivors. It's something that we have to talk about and include when we talk about trafficking. Well, maybe talking publicly isn't your forte, but we have this. There it is, social media. And pretty soon these will become very old and irrelevant. But social media will be relevant for us for a very, very long time. There's a little bit of a dark side that I want to tell you about in social media. First, traffickers actually research and recruit and lure victims through social media, in particular, young girls by older men. They have used Facebook, Kik, Snapchat, and I'm sure other forms of social media. So there is that dark side of traffickers who are using what we feel is this wonderful resource as their tool to facilitate their criminal business. So let me ask you, what do you make sure you do before you leave the house or when you go to sleep at night to make sure you've done? Lock the door. Lock the door. A simple act that you know will keep your home and your family safe. You can do that in social media. You can lock the door and shut out traffickers by encouraging your young people not to share where they live, not to share if they wish they had a boyfriend, not to share provocative pictures of themselves. We can lock the door with those simple steps on human traffickers. But it's also, thankfully, the bright side, that we can use it to educate, to inform, to share information. We can use social media for good. And it can open the door to more education, to more awareness, and hopefully to identify more victims. So we can lock traffickers out, and we can open the door to more people knowing about slavery. We all love pictures, taking pictures. We love apps. won't make you tell me how many you have on your phone. But I want to tell you about Trafficking. This fills a bill for picture takers and app lovers. You can download this app for free. It was actually created by people in Missouri, yay, Missouri. It lets you take 4 pictures in a hotel or motel room anywhere in the United States and to put the address of the hotel and the room number you're in and submit it without you and your identification being shared. Of course, don't be in the pictures. You're just taking pictures of the room with the bedspread and the curtains, and it's added to a huge database that law enforcement use to help identify where a victim of trafficking might be, because victims of trafficking have their pictures taken in the very same hotel and motel rooms that you stay in and put on the internet and advertised in places like Craigslist and Backpage. You can use this app. You can download this app and possibly save a victim's life. In 2016, it rolled out, and 1 month later, there were 56,000 downloads. Amazing how many more people have downloaded since then, and how many more will download tonight after you leave here, and how much more of a difference you will make in possibly saving a victim's life. Another app. Sweat and toil, not as much fun, but in the palm of your hand, you can have information about countries all around the world and their efforts to stop child labor, the products that might use child labor that are produced in each of these countries. You can have that in the palm of your hand. You can have that information about the 168 million children in child labor and the 21 million who are in forced labor. You can use that tool in the palm of your hand to begin to have knowledge, to begin to ask questions, take action, and demand change with a simple app. Let's make it more personal. You can go online and take a slavery footprint survey through just a process of a few questions like where you live, what food you eat, whether you're a gadget geek, or even whether or not you purchase sex. A set of simple questions will get you to possibly 101 slaves working for you. That's how many I found were working for me, and it's probably on the low side. But this will make it more personal for you and not have it be something happening somewhere else, that these laborers are in fact affecting your life and working for you. And there's always Google, blank human trafficking. You can put in anything in there. High school, human trafficking. The city you live in, human trafficking. If you put in child human trafficking, you will find the stories of many of the survivors that we have worked with who've been trafficked as children. If you put in parents human trafficking, that may be a story about someone that we've worked with whose parents sold her from the earliest time that she can remember on through her adult life. If you put in homeless or homelessness and human trafficking, you may find another story of a survivor that we've worked with who was right here in Columbia and homeless and was picked up by someone who offered her a place to stay, and she ended up being trafficked by those people. You could put in prostitution and human trafficking, and you will find that there are victims of trafficking within that industry of prostitution. And in fact, a victim of prostitution may not know they're a victim of trafficking, but if they, like someone we know and worked with, are giving all their money to the pimp or the trafficker, and they're getting regular beatings, they are a victim of trafficking. And you will find those stories and that information. I put in domestic violence before human trafficking recently to share with people who were staff members at a domestic violence shelter, and came up with a resource and a new term that I didn't even know called intimate partner trafficking. And it actually is a term that fits the experience of 2 survivors that we are currently having the privilege to support and help. And what another kind of trafficking to understand that it could be your husband or your boyfriend or girlfriend who takes advantage of that relationship. There is a woman here in Columbia, and her husband did just that, forced her to dance at sex clubs, at strip clubs, for money that profited only him. Another survivor had a boyfriend who moved in and got her gifts and wooed her, flattered her, and then invited her to come on a truck drive with her because he was a truck driver, and ended up trafficking her at truck stops. But with Google, you can also find videos and documentaries and books and even TED Talks that will help you learn about trafficking. What do you call when there's an emergency? 911. Some of you are a little slow. I'm a little worried if you have an emergency. It's 911. Well, I want you to know that there's a hotline number for human trafficking. Again, yes, it is up there. 888-3737-888. Say that for me. 888-3737-888. Please remember that. You know there's a hotline number that you can call now that might help a survivor, a victim of human trafficking. Hold that number, keep that number, use that number. I was so pleased when I went through a grocery store and a clerk, a high school student, had heard me speak the year before, and he still had that toll-free number in his phone. He is prepared, he is ready to help someone when he suspects possibly trafficking. There is also, if you don't like to make a phone call, you can also text help or info to be free. And that also makes it safer and more subtle for victims who want to text on a phone to reach out for help. So you can know this and keep this as well. Half of ABC here. Let's break that down. ABC, aware, believe slavery exists, and call. So we're at the learning phase. Perhaps tonight, you are aware now. You've been here, you're aware. And you must believe that slavery exists, that it no longer is something that you think is happening in another country far away. And you have that toll-free number. At the very least, you can call when you suspect something. But as you move along, become more informed, more engaged, ABC again, attention, that requires more serious involvement, that you consider this issue something to be diligent about, that you take action, that you are investigating. Pay attention, give this attention to your surroundings, to the details, the information about what trafficking is and what it looks like. And believe survivors. That's harder. So many survivors don't ask for help because they're afraid they're not going to be believed. Believe survivors, believe their story, believe what's happened to them, and change the culture. That's really hard. How do you change the culture? Don't purchase sex. Don't view porn. Stop the culture of silence. If you see something, say something. We have to change the culture of silence. A survivor was able to do that. She met someone in a domestic violence shelter, and her roommate shared her story, and she realized that this person was a victim of sex trafficking herself, as she was, and she said something, and she helped that person get help. There was a student who was going to take a job door to door in another state. This student happened to be from China, and he was going to go even further away from his familiar surroundings. And another student who learned about human trafficking, that door-to-door sales is one form of labor trafficking, she warned him, you could be heading towards a case of being victimized in labor trafficking. And that student didn't go, and she possibly saved that person from being exploited. She said something. In Colombia, that residential brothel I mentioned, neighbors were interviewed by news reporters, and they said that for many years, they had noticed suspicious activity, but they never felt like it was their business to say anything. They didn't say anything. Imagine if they had, how much sooner these individuals would be helped. Survivors would have been rescued. My name is Nanette Ward, and I believe that you can prevent human trafficking. Thank you.